How can we characterize the way we experience? What is the structure of Qualia? The structure of Qualia is not well understood. In short, a new field for empirical research, I would say. Probably many of what we think we know right now are likely to be revised. Okay. There are several reasons for this. There are some disputes even in definition of the term Qualia. So we'll go from there. So can we explain what we don't know really well? So as I explained in the last video, IIT proposes a maximally irreducible causal structure, or MIX, MICS, as the explanatory identical to the way we experience work Qualia. But many philosophers have some issues with this kind of statement, because they think not only the Dennett here, but others also think that Qualia by definition ineffable. That means that we cannot describe, and private, that we cannot observe or we cannot be shared by other people. So the ineffability is like, let's say in the case of the way I see this orange or red, I can only try to describe it by like a similarity. Let's say this red is similar to the red that I saw in the wine, or or sunset. This orange is similar to maybe the cups, this cups color and so on. And that's really not the kind of the definition or characterization that philosophers, for example, want to have as a definition of experience, right? And that's the ineffability. However, you might need to stop here and then think about it as with the hat of the scientist. Can we characterize Qualia? And then do we need a language to characterize Qualia? That's quite a questionable kind of an attitude as an empirical scientist and psychophysicist. Can we estimate others' Qualia? Is Qualia really private and never known to other people? I'm not really sure, because many of this consciousness research, like starting from blind sight and also other types of the brain lesion patients or abnormal perception from the birth, it's difficult, definitely, but throughout this all many different kinds of tests and so reports, we are able to understand, we have been able to understand quite a bit. And so there must be a way to go. That's my, address initial reactions. So much evidence, introduced in this class already says answer. The first one, can we characterize Qualia? Yes. Do we need language to characterize Qualia? Probably no. And can we estimate others' Qualia? Most likely yes. So as a particular kind of a strategy, what I have been now proposing is that quantifying Qualia structure through a massive relationship among Qualia. So the idea is that to characterize something that is difficult to define on its own can be actually characterized exactly by relying on the similarity or metaphor or relationship with others, as long as it's really huge relationship. So the problem that we are facing is that to define redness, right? Redness is very difficult to just define as it is, okay? But just think about the way you define or explain something very complicated, like personality. Like if I try to explain my personality to other people, then I could list all these personality, or if I can find a really good word, maybe I'm able to explain my personality to somebody, but that's usually impossible. And instead, what I do is like to introduce myself. Maybe I can list how I belong to other structure of the society, like Monash University, and how I relate to my family or my friends and so on. So the relationship helps me to explain myself, and also you yourself also understand other people by observing how this person actually acts to other people. So observing the relationship tells us much more about the personality rather than self-introduction. Same goes to meaning of the words. Like, definition of the word can be sometimes very difficult, but as you use, thesaurus, the relationship between the others is actually quite helpful for us to understand the meaning. But if you think about it, it's really weird, right? It's tautological. Like, what does it mean to have, let's say, definition? And then if you see the definition, and then the thesaurus says that it's possibly like characterization or something like that, then unless you have some kind of a grounding kind of, starting point, thesaurus shouldn't work. But somehow it works because the relationship actually constrains many things from many different ways, and then that makes the meaning of the word really unique. And similar thing also happens when you try to explain the property of animals or plants in the ecosystem, right? Like, if you try to characterize a koala on its own, then you could possibly, list all the properties of the koala. But how they behave in, eucalyptus, or, in this, particular situation of the climate, or, at the different kind of locations, or how, all these things actually changes the way we explain or we understand the koala. And without that, it's actually impossible to understand the koala. And without koala's description, we also don't understand what the eucalyptus means. You can, identify, or you can describe eucalyptus itself, but it's completely, missing some important thing about eucalyptus. But that depends on its relation to koala, and that again, tautological. But as long as you try to, make all these, description of relationship, it somehow starts to make sense. Same goes for even the physics, black holes. Here in a black hole is some cosmological object, astrophysics object that we cannot directly observe. Okay, so the direct definition of the black hole is impossible through the observation, but its interaction with other objects is something we can actually observe and magnify, measure and quantify and predict. And this is a way to that our physicists actually have been characterizing the black hole. Same goes even in mathematics. There are lots of different kinds of infinities, and once things becomes infinity, as normal people, you can't do anything, right? However, there are different kinds of infinities, and how the mathematicians deals with that is that to understand its relationship with others. Infinity itself is not possible to define further than infinity itself, but its relationship allows us to understand what it is. So all of this so far has been just a metaphorical, I explained, but it is mathematically proved in a Yoneda lemma in category theory. And the Yoneda lemma is like a pre-theorem, a theorem before proving some kind of major theorem. And you don't need to understand this equation at all, but this enigmatic equation here eventually allows us to, so this is a Yoneda lemma, allows us to say something very interesting, which is here, HA means that the A's relationship with other objects, if that's similar or equivalent here with the relationship between B and everything else, that's HB, then A and B has to be equivalent here. Okay, so in English, what it means is that if the relationships are the same, then the two are the same. In an application to a Qualia structure, what it means is that, let's say, you want to characterize redness, and then redness can be characterized through the relationship with purple, and how it's similar to orange, and how it's similar to another red. And then if all these relationships are the same between these two reds, then this two red itself has to be the same. Okay, so that's the Yoneda lemma and its implication. In this is a relatively new concept that we have also published. So it's not yet proven or proven useful for many different kind of situations. But here, for example, the application of the Yoneda lemma can be readily kind of appreciated. So here, this darkness of the A patch and darkness of the B patch looks completely different to most of you, right? And that's the Yoneda lemma basically says that that's because its relationship with the others are different. And so this HA, which is corresponding to how this A is similar to this is dissimilar, this is dissimilar to 1, this is similar to 2, is not the same as how the B is related to others. So B is now similar to I, but dissimilar to 2. So this thing is already different, right? These two things are already different. And therefore, A and B cannot be the same or similar. Now, Yoneda lemma also predicts that if these discrepant relations are removed one by one. So here we removed this one thing and another thing that is causing the discrepancy between A and B. And then if we start to remove all these discrepant relationship, then it should start to look the same if A and B are the kind of the thing that Yoneda lemma describes, which is called category. And in this case, I think it is clear that indeed relationships are the same, and then that's how luminance or brightness looks similar. So that's a kind of intuitive example of this idea that the relationships can characterize how we see things in terms of Qualia. So in fact, one of the examples that I gave in this class that in week 5, if you remember, Ariel Zeleznyko Johnston have demonstrated is something like this. So what Ariel tried to address is the equivalence of the color Qualia structure between the fovea and periphery. Here I say equivalent and not the same or identical, because if you think about it, it's already obvious that it's different in some way, right? In terms of the resolution or in terms of the position, it cannot be the same from the beginning. So there is no point in talking about the same or different or identical or whatever with this kind of very vague notion of the same or differentness. But the category theory in mathematics, which is a foundation for the Yoneda lemma, allows us to give many different levels of the sameness, and the equivalence is one type. That means that the structure is interchangeable at some level. And here, because peripheral and central color patches are having more or less the same kind of structure, we were able to conclude that peripheral and central color experience structure is equivalent. Okay. So in summary, Qualia structures can be characterized in many ways. And one way, which we call a relational approach, is one of the most promising ways. And so what do we know about the particular Qualia structure? Can we say something about this with this type of approach? That's the next thing.